Hello everyone, bonsoir tout le monde. My name is David Neufeld, and I am proud to serve as your USJE National President. I want to begin by recognizing that while USJE is convening this town hall virtually, we are meeting on Indigenous land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. I am joining you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, the territory where USJE's national office is located. Please note that simultaneous interpretation is available, and in order to access that service, please click on the interpretation button. I want to welcome you to tonight's information session. The reality is that we are holding this town hall because affected notices were served to over 400 of our members employed by CSC. While USJE has been actively monitoring CSC's workforce adjustment plans for several months, information about Wave 2 has just been shared in the last couple of weeks. As such, our goal this evening is to provide you with as much information as possible and provide guidance through the WFA process. I'm joined by my seasoned Director of Labor Relations, Melanie Crescenzi, as well as PSAC subject matter expert, Darren Pachon, on the Workforce Adjustment Appendix. We will begin with an overview of the notices received, followed by a presentation on the WFA Appendix. After that, we will be split into breakout rooms to have a more group-specific conversation that will be led by your USJE Regional Vice President. The groups will be split as follows. 1, Human Resources. 2, Corporate Services. 3, Health Services. And 4th, Programs. Now don't worry, we have technical support, and our communications team will explain how to join those breakout rooms and will be available to provide support if needed. Before we get started with our invited representatives, I would like to share that although USJE understands that CSC has a mandate under the Comprehensive Expenditure Review to find operational savings, we strongly oppose both the proposed cuts and the process by which these decisions were made. The positions affected are vital to the effective operations of the federal correctional system. At no point was USJE given any opportunities to provide feedback or insight, despite months of discussions regarding budget reductions and organizational changes. At this stage, USJE is extremely concerned about the unintended impacts of this latest round of reductions. USJE believes that they will have a negative effect on the workplace well-being of USJE members, overall employee morale, and add to already untenably high workloads. Inevitably, the cumulative impact will be significant. It is undeniable that these cuts will have an impact on USJE's public safety personnel. As soon as USJE received notice that affected letters were going out, I met with the leadership of CSC to obtain additional information. At this stage, USJE is pressing for greater transparency around the cuts. Specifically, USJE has been requesting that the Correctional Service of Canada provide the true cost of these reductions and identify what measures will be put in place to ensure that our members will not be expected to do more with less. USJE has also questioned the number of vacant positions being used to account for a portion of the operational savings, and the number of positions being outright eliminated through the WFA process. USJE has also been challenging CSC on how they intend to introduce or utilize artificial intelligence in the workplace in the future, as this is something that was woven throughout the federal government budget in November 2025 as a means to gain efficiencies. The Commissioner has mentioned that the integration of AI will not be done without consultation with the relevant stakeholders, including unions, but we do not know yet what this will look like. Our main goals for tonight's information session are to provide you with as much information and support as possible for you to make an informed decision and to collect information from you to help us defend your work. I would like to note that USJE's Director of Labor Relations, Melanie Crescenzi, sits on all WFA committees where USJE members are being impacted. I want to thank her for taking on this very important work. Je tiens à souligner que la directrice chevronnée des relations de travail du SESJ Mélanie Crescenzi a participé à tous les comités concernant le réaménagement des effectifs qui touchent les membres du SESJ. Je souhaite la remercier d'avoir entrepris ce travail très important. I will now turn it over to Melanie to go more in depth about the information that has been provided to USJE about these recent cuts at CSC. Melanie?
Good evening. As David noted, I sit on all the WFA committees where USJE has affected members. For tonight's purposes, I will start by providing a brief overview of the big numbers that...
Hey, Mel. Apparently your internet is lagging, although
shared for
you're
wave
right
2.
next to me.
That part
so
will
I'm
be done in French.
gonna go ask you to switch office with me so you can come and make your presentation here because you're lagging over there. And we're just side by side. I'm crystal clear. Your presentation is too important.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna ask you to come over here and if you can speak here. So we'll ask everyone just to give us a moment. Technology.
Apologies. Okay. Well,
There you go.
okay. Apologies. Scene change. I'll start from the beginning. So as David noted, I sit on all WFA committees for USG where we have affected members. For tonight's purpose, I will start by providing a brief overview of the big numbers that were shared for Wave 2. That part will be done in French, and then thereafter we'll try to drill down a little bit on the information by different sectors, what's been provided to us to date. That part will be done in English. Donc, OK. Dans le cadre de la deuxième vague d'initiatives du service correctionnel, la première réunion au cours de laquelle nous avons pris connaissance des secteurs qui seraient concernés par cette deuxième et dernière exercice de l'examen exhaustif des dépenses a eu lieu le 19 juin. Par la suite, le département a communiqué plus de détails au cours de la semaine du 22 juin. Comme beaucoup d'entre vous le savent, c'est aussi au cours de la semaine du 22 juin que les avis de statut touché ont été envoyés à nos membres, ce qui nous a laissé très peu, en fait zéro temps, pour analyser les informations puis pour nous préparer. Nous en sommes encore qu'au début de la deuxième étape, mais ce que nous sachions jusqu'à ce jour, c'est qu'il y a 405 membres du SESJ qui sont touchés par la deuxième vague. Parmi ces 405 membres, il y en a, la réduction vise à 144 postes. Donc, dans les 405 membres, 392 sont éligibles au programme de départ volontaire, donc le PDV, et se trouvent actuellement dans leur période de 30 jours prévue par ce programme. À quelques exceptions, s'il y en a, la période du PDV prendra fin le 24 juillet 2026 pour tous les membres qui sont éligibles. Le reste, donc 13 membres, ne sont pas éligibles au PDV et selon nos informations, ont été informés qu'ils se trouvent actuellement dans leur période d'option car leur poste sera éliminé. So obviously we can't go into every affected status for every position, but there are some notable changes to 4 of CSC's sectors that the department has advised us of. So as David noted, these are human resources, corporate services, health services, and correctional programs. I'll share what we know for each of those and some stats as well. So for human resources, CSC's position is that they continue to push to streamline processes and services to meet their organizational priorities and to eliminate duplication of work. In total, 148 members across the HR sector represented by USJE have been affected, with an overall reduction target of 46 positions. What this could look like across the country, we're told there may be reduction in administrative support that was previously dedicated to directors or assistant directors. We all know that there has been recent changes to recruitment and staffing, and so the needs have changed, which will also likely lead to reducing the number of resources previously allocated to staffing, administration, and support services. For training and development, CSC has made no secret that they are looking to change how it delivers training and its learning services, which will result in a change in work for staff training coordinators and officers. For corporate services, the main focus appears to be the fact that CSC is moving to a centralized financial operations model, and as a result, there will be a reduction in mainly CR5 positions across the regions. 62 USJE members in corporate services received notices of affected status, and the department expects to reduce this group by 10 positions. For health services, as we shared in the past in our May town hall, health services was changing the way it operates even before the comprehensive expenditure review. They were looking to address present-day needs, which includes additional and better support for an aging demographic, individuals with substance abuse needs, and Indigenous patients. We're told that 10% of the nursing workforce will be reclassified as licensed practical nurses, so LPNs, and those that can provide a wide array of services. LPNs are USJE members, so this will likely lead to a slight increase in our membership for LPNs. However, like everything else, when there are changes, there are likely to be reductions. As of now, for health services, 22 USJE members have received notices of affected status, with an overall reduction target of 13 positions. And then we have correctional program modernization. The term modernization is CSC's terminology, not USJE's. But what they mean by that is they're seeking to make program management more efficient, less administratively burdensome. There's been talk, as far as we know, about a need to ensure that programs are delivered at the right time, in the right sequence, and with an objective of supporting the offender's progress in their correctional plans. There's also talk about examining the certification process for correctional program officers to make the process more efficient. As a result, 153 of the 405 affected positions are within the program sector at CSC, with a reduction target of 68. We do have a little bit more information on those specific numbers, so we can break down those numbers a little bit more. So of the 153 affected, 94 program officers received their notices with a reduction target of 44 positions. 24 program managers or regional program managers with a reduction target of 10 positions, and then 35 program assistants with a reduction target of 14 positions. That's the stats as we have them to this date. As we said, we're still in the early stages. Where I don't have data and what we really need, what is not being shared with us by the employer, is a strategy to address the holes that's left by reducing the workforce. USJE has been adamant that any legitimate cuts to human resourcing has to be accompanied by a plan on how the services will be reduced or significantly changed to account for the fact that you have fewer people doing the work. Not surprisingly, the employer has failed to provide us any such plan, and some sector heads have even advised that there is no such plan. So while we can analyze data like what I just shared all day long, it does not tell us what the real-life implications are for those who are left in the workplace. That's why we're hoping after this information session, there will be a 1-hour focus group, and we're hoping to hear from you today as to how the cuts are affecting you. And we look forward to reviewing that focus information. À toi la parole, David.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you for all the information provided and your support at this crucial time. USJE has been very busy over the past few months as we are working to get as much information as possible from departments and agencies. We have also sought to equip USJE representatives at every level, including regional vice presidents, with the information and tools to fight these cuts and best represent our members. There has also been some strong media interest over the last little while on the cuts being made within the public safety realm. Consequently, we have leveraged several opportunities to highlight the invaluable role of USJE members in keeping Canadians safe. This includes briefings to the Minister's Office, where possible, and briefings to the Commissioner of the Correctional Service of Canada, and comments made to the media. When we first heard about the Comprehensive Expenditure Review and workforce adjustments, we developed 4 major goals. The first one was to create a campaign that fights to protect members' jobs, workplace conditions, and public safety. Second of all, ensure that the campaign includes sustained political action and puts pressure on the government to, whenever possible, reconsider and reverse decisions taken that have an impact on public safety and our membership. Thirdly, implement a campaign that promotes member mobilization across the country and encourages members to stand up against those cuts. And fourthly, provide support and education to our frontline members who are impacted by the cuts and workforce adjustment. I am proud to report that we are delivering on those 4 campaign goals, and I invite you to visit our campaign website, safetyandjeopardy.ca, for more information. Pour accéder notre site web de campagne, je vous invite à visiter sécuritéendanger.ca pour plus d'informations. I will now turn it over to Darren from PSAC to go more in depth about the Workforce Adjustment Appendix and WFA.
Thanks, David. I'll wait for my our technicians to add the English and French PowerPoints to the Zoom, and then I'll begin. Perfect. I see the English and the French. On y va. Thank you so much, everyone, for inviting me this evening to chat. My name is Darren Paccioni. I'm a Senior Research Officer at the PSAC, and I've been the co-lead on developing the materials with respect to workforce adjustment with my fantastic colleague, Erin Surrett, who can't be here tonight. The numbers that Melanie were describing are a part of a broader picture with respect to WFA at the PSAC, in that there are nearly 15,000 affected notices out to PSAC members, received by PSAC members since January 2025. Just want to share that broader piece with everybody. And I'll ask the technicians to move to the next slide, please. So, well, I will be talking predominantly about the WFA appendix that's found in the SV, TC, EB, PA collective agreements, of which they're USJE members. I'm going to start with the job security article and point out that as part of the advocacy work around WFA, the committees that exist at the departmental levels, one of the key advocacy points is that any reduction in the workforce will be accomplished through attrition. That's why you're hearing David and Melanie talk about the advocacy done at the committees, talking to folks. Job cuts should be the last resorts, of course. And we know the harms of layoff during DRAP, but the strong language of the collective agreement mitigated against the involuntary layoff during the 2012-2013 Deficit Reduction Action Plan job cuts. Next slide, please. So the objective of the Workforce Adjustment Appendix, and it'll be a different letter in each of those respective collective agreements I mentioned, but there's two core takeaways here. One, that the WFA appendix only applies to indeterminate members. There are resources related to term employees found on the PSAC WFA landing page, and that the objective of the appendix is to maximize employment opportunities for indeterminate employees. Next slide, please. So what is workforce adjustment? I've seen what the objective is, just spoke to what the objective is. Workforce adjustment is declared by the deputy head in the department, and they do it for reasons of lack of work, the discontinuance of a function, relocation in which an employee does not wish to participate, or alternative delivery initiative. Now, the first two are the most common types, what we see the most, and they're typically invoked when the government implements budget cuts. So we've seen in the 2025 budget, but also prior to that through the last few budgets. Next slide, please. So this slide and the next slide are speak to the notification to the union and then the notification to the employee. So to the member. First, with respect to the union, there is the appendix outlines consultative processes related to WFA, setting up the committees. And of course, the USJE has been incredibly active in setting up those committees and engaging in as much consultation with the respective departments as possible. The union is notified 2 days prior to members being notified of their affected status, again, in efforts to sort of to organize and prepare and to support members when they receive that information. And the final 4 points there identify the type of information that the employer must communicate to the union: the identity, the location of work units, expected date of the announcement, anticipated timing, the number, the count, the group and level of employees to be affected by the declaration. Next slide, please. So the notification to employees. On the PSC landing page, there is the PSC at WFA landing page, there is a section, a link called Affected Checklist. We developed a checklist to support members who received affected notices, and I would invite you to go and check out those links on the landing page. We'll point to those at the end. But in that letter that one initially receives, the employee is advised that their services may no longer be required for reasons of WFA. They become affected. That is, they're affected. That's the status under WFA. That letter may also advise you that a voluntary departure program has been established, and that now you have a minimum of 30 days to decide whether or not you want to participate. So reading that letter closely, asking questions of the USJE's labor relations officers or your local president or reps in your department. We know that some of the letters are not written the most clear way, so don't hesitate to ask questions if something feels unclear. The letter may also say you are in receipt of a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, in which case then you have, again, a decision to make. And I'll get into that concept on the next slide. Or it may say that you are made opt-in, at which point you have a new time, you have a different timeline to take consideration of. You have 120 days to make a decision to decide whether you're going to choose options A, B, or C. So these are the different things that letters, not everybody's letter is going to be the same. So these are the different things that you may see in these letters.
Darren, I'm just going to interrupt just for a quick second here because I'm just seeing some questions. And the PowerPoints are being shared in both official languages. There's one in English and one in French. If you look on the top of your menu of Zoom, you will see like different windows where it says like ELC Tech 2 screen. That's where the English PowerPoint is. And then the other one is ELC Tech Kyle screen. Kyle is displaying the French PowerPoint. So if you want to make sure that you view the English, please click on the ELC Tech 2 screen. Just want to make sure that you can have access to these. And rest assured, if you miss for the first few slides, these will be published on our website along with a recording of this information session. Probably not tomorrow, and in a few days or whatnot, but rest assured these PowerPoints will be made available to you so you can download it and share it with your coworker. Sorry to interrupt there, Darren.
No, not at all. Sorry, I didn't mention that off the top. I'm glad that folks have the language of their choice now. So the one last thing I'm going to mention on the notification of employees, because it came up in the previous the town hall, the 6:30 town hall, was if you happen to be on leave without pay that falls under a human rights protected ground, leave without pay, like LTD, for example, know that know that there is a post on the PSC website that speaks to this, as well as guidance has been provided to the components, but also guidance has been provided to Treasury Board or by Treasury Board to departments. To summarize, basically, if management determines that your position is no longer required, there's a WFA, you should receive, and if you're on a long-term disability, for example, you should receive the affected letter at the same time as your coworkers in the workplace who are also affected. If there's a voluntary departure program, and I'll kind of get to those pieces, you must be given the opportunity to volunteer to leave the public service and receive the corresponding entitlements. So the idea is ensuring that everybody has access to all of the options if they so choose to avail themselves of that. Think also focus on parental leave and that. If your work unit is reducing the number of employees performing the same or similar duties, any retention process, I'm going to get to what that means, the SURLO processes, any of them that they will be conducted. Our position is that the union has argued that you should not be included in any sort of retention process where you have to compete for one's own job unless you are able and willing to participate. The guidance that Treasury Board has shared on this one gets a bit more complicated because the regulations do not prohibit folks or management from putting folks through protected who are on leaves through such processes, but it is a possibility for that to happen frustratingly. But we have to add, there's an advocacy piece there. And second, and finally, if you're not retained through a retention process or if your position is eliminated, you get an opting letter out of the gates. Again, you'll be made opting. This should not occur until you return from work unless you request otherwise. So take a look at I'll perhaps get Seb to add that into the chat, but know that these are all available on the PSC WFA landing page. Next slide, please. So some core concepts. I was just kind of talking about situations that a member may be in when they receive an affected letter. If you get your affected letter, it's going to say it could say you have to pay close attention to if a voluntary departure program is established or you're beginning your opting period because the position there was a discontinuance of a function. It lays out the sort of the situation. You may in this letter receive a reasonable job offer, and it's defined in the collective agreement. This is a concept defined in the collective agreement. This is an indeterminate offer of employment in the core public service, normally at the equivalent level, maybe a lower level, in which case there's salary protection. Folks in this situation must be both trainable and mobile. Where practicable, a reasonable job offer shall be within the employee's headquarter area. Headquarter area is defined by the travel directive, and a reasonable job offer is also an offer in another federal public service employer. Could be at the CRA, for example, or CFIA. The appointment is at a rate of pay, the same attainable maximum salary, and no less than the employee's current salary and attainable maximum, and all benefits. There's a seamless transition of benefits. Think continuous, think accrual of benefits, sick leaves, severance, accumulated vacation credits. That's your reasonable job offer. If there's no reasonable job offer, there may be a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. If an employee receives a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, they retain their current salary and will be paid until the employer eventually gives them a reasonable job offer. There's no time limit to that entitlement, and they must be given meaningful work until they receive that reasonable job offer. Until then, they also hold surplus priority status within the department as they continue to work. So some core concepts that could be found in the letter. Next slide, please. So the voluntary departure program, Melanie mentioned a little bit about this. I alluded to it earlier. If you don't receive a guarantee of a reasonable job offer or a reasonable job offer, the a voluntary departure program may be established within your work unit if there are 5 or more employees at the same group and level in the same work unit. Sometimes we see that threshold be ignored, and voluntary departure programs are offered to everybody in that work unit. The pension waiver, which I'll speak to more later, is available for eligible members choosing option B. You don't get the pension waiver if you choose option C. And as you see, the options available for you if you're selecting to exit the public service through a voluntary departure are option B, which is a transitional support measure, and then you resign, or option C, which is an education allowance, the transition support measure, as well as a resignation, or C2, which is the education allowance, the transitional support measure, and up to 2 years of leave without pay. And I'll get into the details of the options in a moment. If you don't know if voluntary departure program is right for you, or maybe you're not as close to retirement as you would have hoped to been, contact a labor relations officer, and they're more than happy to sit down with you and workshop the situation, and also lean on the resources that Seb will share in the chat as part of that we've developed for folks. Next slide, please. So if the voluntary departure program doesn't get enough volunteers to meet the job reduction target, the employer may undergo a process called the selection of employees for retention and layoff, the SERLO process. For those who may have been around in 2012, 2013, this is a terrible, terrible process, very stressful. You would have heard about members competing for their own job. This is a process that it's complete managerial discretion, lacks transparency, and there's little recourse. Managers have the prerogative to set the essential criteria, including the language requirements. And folks from the last session asked if they could change the language requirements. And yes, they do have the full discretion to set the essential qualifications, including language requirements, although we're not seeing complete swaps, but there's problems in some places. They also can consider future and current operational needs. I'm just seeing questions pop up. I will try to get to the questions at the end. For future operational so for future operational requirements and needs of the organizations, employment equity is part of the framework in which that can be considered. It's not legislatively mandated, but folks undergoing a SERLO process, the advocacy groups, the committees are pressuring them to consider employment equity as part of the needs of the organization. We're hearing some departments doing that through the process. So please move to the next slide. Nope. Okay, there we go. So the opting employees, if an employee does not receive a guarantee of a reasonable job offer or a reasonable job offer and isn't retained after a SERLO process, they become opting. This means they have a difficult choice to make. This means that they have a 120-day window to make a decision. Otherwise, option A is chosen for them. There's a $1,200 counseling services allowance that you may lean on for support around potential reemployment or retirement. But let's get into the options a little bit there. So option A means that you are seeking to stay in the public service. You have a 12-month time-limited period where you have surplus priority status to find a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. Your surplus priority status allows you, it's a priority under the Public Service Employment Act, of which hiring managers during competitions, they have to look at those folks with the surplus priority first. There's an order of priorities. So these folks are searching for guarantees, or these folks are searching for reasonable job offers. Through this period, you retain your salary, your pension, your benefits, and you're eligible for 2 years of retraining. If you resign partway through this period, you'll receive a lump sum payment equal to the balance of the surplus period. And after 12 months, you are laid off, and your salary, pension, and benefits ends upon layoff. You're eligible for severance and 1 year of layoff priority, as well as 2 years of retraining. So that's option A. Option B, this is where the member is laid off but leaves the public service with a transition support measure. As an example, say you have there's an annex within the WFA appendix. Say you have 16 to 29 years of service. You get 52 weeks of salary. That's what your TSM would look like. It's a cash payment. You may also be eligible for the pension waiver depending on your age and years of service. There'll be a slide I'll get to in 2 slides from now that'll give more detail there. And you resign. Option C has 2 parts. Part 1 is the TSM, $17,000 education allowance, up to $17,000 with receipts. There's a lot of flexibility of what those education dollars could be used for, and resignation. And part 2 of option C is the TSM, education allowance, and up to 2 years of leave without pay. When a member chooses option C1, you have to maintain that connection with your HR department. Like, you get the email so you can send them your receipts. And again, know that the opting employee has 120 days to make this decision. But say if you make it in 10 days, then you choose option A, your 12-month surplus priority period, the balance of the 120 days, that 110 days of that 120-day period is added to the 12-month surplus priority period. So that's making a decision more quickly, especially if you want to stay, gives you that period for a bit longer. Okay, I will jump to the next slide. Alternation. So you may have heard about alternation. PSAC has an alternation platform. So does Treasury Board. They have an alternation platform on the Treasury Board application portal. Essentially, this is available to opting and surplus priority employees. Those are folks who've chosen option A. They may swap jobs with non-affected employees who want to exit the public service. To be eligible, the alternating employees must be at the same group and level or be considered equivalent, and that is within a 6% pay differential. The employer is quite strict on the 6% pay differential. We're bargaining for a higher one, but that's bargaining. That's not what's in the contract at the moment. The affected employee must meet the qualifications for the position they want to alternate into, including the language requirement. They're not going to be they're not going to be like a perfect match necessarily. It's not a carbon copy. So there may be some onboarding orienting required. And know that the non-affected employee chooses the incentive for the non-affected employee exiting is option B or C1. They don't get option to the 2 years of leave without pay. And of course, if you choose option B, there's pension waiver eligibility possibilities. Check out the PSAC FAQs. The alternation section is quite comprehensive. It speaks to rights and protections. If you feel that there's something that something is not if you're denied an alternation request or it's taking too long, reach out to an LRO, a labor relations officer at USJE or PSAC rep for more information, and know that there's guidance in arbitral jurisprudence around how approvals and denials work. So sometimes there are grievances filed. Many instances there are grievances filed. Also know that that you should keep everything in writing as much as you can, so you have as much sort of clarity on the back and forth between that. Decisions about alternation requests should be made in a timely manner, and denials should not be based on untimeliness alone. Next slide, please. Okay, the pension waiver. So the pension waiver, it's not a part of the WFA appendix, but it's an important tool to help older workers transition into retirement. It is a provision of the Public Service Superannuation Act. Deputy heads must certify that you're a surplus employee as a result of a workforce adjustment situation if you're choosing option B, and you have to meet the age and years of service requirements, and that you are not in receipt of an education allowance, a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, or a reasonable job offer. The deputy heads do not have the authority to deny pension waivers if all the conditions are met. They have to accept it. Now, a question was asked in the previous session of like, okay, what is the pension waiver? Typically, if you leave, say, like if you think about if you leave the public service before you meet your factor to leave with an unreduced pension, factor 85, for example, a 5% per year penalty is applied. The waiver in WFA situations removes that penalty that's applied to the annual allowance that would otherwise be applied because an individual at termination did not meet the age or service thresholds to receive the immediate annuity, the pension. So it's the removal, the suspension of the penalty. That is what the pension waiver is. I just see a question pop up about severance going along with the TSM in the chat. I will address that now, as well as maybe when we get to it later. You are eligible, so I won't go back the 2 slides, but if you choose option B, for example, if you're in a voluntary departure program, you choose option B, you are eligible for severance upon layoff, and the amount of severance upon layoff is outlined in an article of the collective agreement. There's a specific section, depending on your collective agreement. I don't know all the numbers off by heart, but there's a severance pay section, and there's a severance upon layoff section. You're eligible for that in addition to the TSM, your transition support measure, if you choose option B. Catching questions as they come. Next slide, please. Okay, so you may have heard a lot about the early retirement incentive announced in the budget 2025 in November. The early retirement incentive, similar to the pension waiver, reduced the ages, although not the same as the pension waiver, reduced the age thresholds to become access for the suspension of the penalty if you choose the ERI. You have to have the 2 years of service, you have to have at least 10 years of public pensionable service, and then 10 years of public service employment. There are separate and distinct criteria created by Treasury Board for participation in that. Those criteria include the organization needs to reduce its workforce, services to Canadians must be maintained, current and future operational businesses will continue to be met. We're not sure exactly what those mean, but know that there are additional criteria. And I've given you just like the window which it's open. It closes in a few weeks, and some current statistics. If you select a PSAC, so if you choose an option, for example, just know that if you choose an option, say you choose option B, you are not eligible for the early retirement incentive. You may be eligible for the pension waiver, but it's a fork in the road situation that they've created by running this parallel program. Next slide, please. Okay, so the WFA committees so just know that in the background, there is PSAC, USJE advocacy at these departmental committees, national, I'm not sure about regional and local for the USJE departments, but basically they are set up and established. They are essential mechanisms to try to around the implementation and holding the employer to account to the language that members have ratified, bargained into their collective agreements. The WFA, not all the issues are outlined in the collective agreement, so the WFA process, the WFA committees are spaces to have those discussions, including the conversations around temp agencies and getting rid of contractors before engaging in workforce adjustment. Next slide, please. What has been added to the chat in many throughout the presentation, there are the resources on the PSAC WFA landing page. There's this great video that walks folks through the process in a similar way to which I'm explaining now, highlighting key concepts and processes. And I know I've moved quickly, so that's why we're kind of pointing to the guide and the FAQs and the alternation platform. Please to the next slide. And again, this is what I was pointing to there. So there's the website there, psc.ca/workforce adjustment, and the member guide, alternation platform, affected checklist, frequently asked questions that we continue to update. Know that the USJE labor relations officers are there to support you. My team is there to support USJE through this process and to try to put as much information as folks can. We know that it won't make the getting an affected notice less stressful, but having that information may ease the pressure on making that next decision, and know that there's support for you if you need it.
Great. Thank you very much, Darren. We did have a few questions coming in. The first one, for option C2, when do we need to tell the employer? We were told they need to know in 30 days, but here it says 120.
Right. That's a great question. So the 30 days is the minimum timeline for which you need to respond to the voluntary departure program. So if a voluntary departure program has been established, and I am assuming here, but if a voluntary departure program has been established, there's a minimum of 30 days. And I mentioned that when I was giving comment on the VDP. I think the CSC one is 30 days. If you choose to exit the public service via voluntary departure program, you can say, hey, I would like to choose option C2. You can do that. You don't have to wait 120 days in that instance. Where you have a 120-day decision-making window is if you are an opting employee. So there's no voluntary departure program. You are an opting employee. There's a 120-day decision-making window. If you don't make a decision in there, you're automatically deemed to have chosen option A. But that's where you can choose option C2 is if you're an opting employee. That's where the 120-day piece versus the 30-day piece comes into play.
Perfect. Thank you, Darren. I've got 3 more questions lined up for you. Are you eligible for the RTI pension waiver age if you take VDP, or you must be 55?
Just give me a moment.
Mm-hmm.
The RTI, I'm just not quite capturing that acronym. I think it's the ERI. Is that what we mean? The early, I think it's related to that. I think it maybe just be the translation on that one.
We can go to another question and see if it's going to answer it. ERI pension waiver age, does it apply to VDP?
No, it doesn't. It's 2 separate processes. So if remember what I was saying in the beginning, and I think this is what that first question was getting at as well, is that there is specific criteria for this early retirement incentive, and the specific criteria, part of that criteria is you cannot. So there's a section on the website. If you Google the ERI program, there's a section on the website that explains that I'll read it. It says the ERI is not available to employees who are entitled to a separation of benefit under the workforce adjustment appendix. This means that they have chosen or been deemed to have chosen an option under the workforce adjustment. So if you choose option B under VDP, you are going to have the pension waiver, the 55 and 61. If you have not chosen option B and you're considering a VDP, you won't be able to really avail yourself of the VDP because to use the VDP, you have to choose an option. So if you're considering ERI, it's going to be separate from the VDP. So the different age thresholds will apply in that instance. Sorry if that's confusing. You cannot have the ERI age thresholds and choose an option under the VDP. Those two pathways cannot cross.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Another question for you, Darren, and this is the last one we've got coming in, so please send in your questions. Now, keep in mind, if you want us to, we can't look at your particular individual situation. We can provide answers to basic general questions. If you want to discuss your individual case, please contact either your USJE regional vice president or your USJE labor relations officer or even your PSAC regional representative, and they'll be able to actually sit down with you and look at how they can assist you. So Darren, regarding the VDP, does the 2-year education clock start as soon as the last day of employment starts, or must it just be started within 2 years from retirement? VDP would start in October, and most education programs have already started the year.
Yeah, no, it's a great question on like the timing and process. It's not 2 years from retirement because some folks will take those 2 years of leave without pay and they'll get another job and they may find another job and be deployed back in because you're not resigning yet if you choose the option C2. So it starts kind of it's like you make the decision. You say, hey, I want to choose C2 and a date that your leave without pay would be established. The thing about the timing of the education piece, that's really important because there is a line, and I just answered a question about this yesterday. There's a line that you have to submit the receipt within like a year, otherwise you're going to be considered layoff. But like I think that you're considered layoff. So being in close touch with your manager is really important on this one, giving them that education plan, flagging it for your USJE representatives, letting them know that this is the plan, and note because some education programs, it's like you pay your tuition at like once a year, or it doesn't start until the following year just based on timing. So you have to just be in close contact about that with your manager and your department on this situation in order to ensure that you're getting your money reimbursed and they just don't sort of like by default think you not submitted anything and you're laid off. So communicate early and often. That I think will help that situation where like the education program, maybe I got to wait 11 months to do that. So I think that getting your education plan communicated is super useful on that one. That's a great process question.
Good. Thank you, Darren. Again, last call for questions. We do have one more question for you, Darren, and then we're going to break out into breakout rooms, more into focus groups. If everyone's interested, we'll break out so we can obtain more information from you on what the repercussion of potential job cuts at CSC could have on your coworkers and also on the impact to public safety delivery. Question, Darren. Does employees still receive severance under option B if you opted to take it when it was removed back in 2012? We're going back in time here.
Yeah.
We were probably not there.
I was not there, no. However, great question. Gets asked all the time. If you've cashed out that severance pay, that is I'm just trying to find the article in the collective agreement that speaks to it. So what is being talked about is the severance pay for voluntary separation, resignation, and retirement. That if you've cashed it out, you kind of like that is done. Basically, like that is like you've cashed it out already. There's no extra monies there. Where I did say that there is severance in the article so there's an appendix in the collective agreement that speaks to that situation, the 2011-2012 piece. There is a piece that remains in the collective agreement of severance upon layoff. It outlines a criteria around years of continuous employment where you're eligible for. It's like 2 weeks. What is it? On first layoff, the first complete year, what is it for? 3 weeks of pay for 10 years on less than 24 weeks of pay for 20 plus so severance of pay upon layoff still applies. All that to say, the collective agreement in the severance pay article outlines the severance upon layoff eligibility that you are money that you're eligible for upon layoff. What the person is talking about is the old language of 2012, and if you've taken that money, then yes, you've taken all that money out. But this other one still applies and you'll get that in addition to the TSM. And if you have extra vacation, that'll also get paid out too. That was a question that came up at the previous one as well.
Another question for you: when will someone receive TSM of going option C?
When will they receive? So what we've heard from that's a pay center processing question. What we have heard from the pay center processing team on this one particularly, if you'll give me just one moment, I'll pull up the latest.
Yeah, I'm kind of putting you on the spot for outside of WFA questions.
No, this is good. That's a WFA one.
Appreciate your expertise, Darren.
So what we've heard around timely processing of TSMs related to WFA is there's a 25-day service standard is what we've been told by the pay center on this one. And everybody that is processing a TSM, which means like they're exiting the public service, is assigned a compensation advisor who remains with the employee until to take care of the case until all the payments are released. So far, we haven't heard major issues of people not getting their TSMs outside of that 25-day mark. So, and we've reported that recently to USJE, to Melanie, actually. So that's a great question because folks that there should be no uncertainty around getting the payments. Like the payments are coming and they're moving, and there's escalatory pathways if there's delays, but that's the service standard.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Darren, thank you for making the time to spend the evening with us. We had 2 information sessions. I know we could not, even in the previous sessions, we did not have enough time to cover all of the questions. Melanie, is there anything you wanted to say? Because I did not get any LR questions for you. But thank you, Darren. So now we will ask Megan to share in the breakout room links in the chat, and you just have to click on that and you'll be redirected to your group. The first group is for HR, Human Resources. That conversation will be led by Regional Vice President from beautiful British Columbia, Kirsty Havert. The second group is for Corporate Services, and that will be led by Regional Vice President Jeff Sandelli from the Prairies. The third group, Health Services, and that will be led by one of our own FAWs, Lorianne Wesselby from Dorchester, New Brunswick. And last but certainly not least, Programs. Very important. That conversation will be led by Regional Vice President, another one from the Prairies, Shauna Ward. So those links are in the chat. You simply have to click on them and you will be redirected into a different meeting. It's just a 1-hour focus group for you to give us some ammunition so that the union can really defend your job and why the impacts it will have to public safety. So thank you very much, everyone. And just remember, these recordings will be made available on our website, including the PowerPoint presentation by PSAC. Bonne soirée.